things you gain getting out of prison as well as the things you lose. We were talking about is losing that, he called it a brotherhood. I've always called it a sense of camaraderie, which is, I guess, the same thing in different languages. But it's really this idea of feeling like you're in an experience with other people who understand it in a way that nobody else will. I've heard veterans talk about this. I've heard people in law enforcement. I've heard people in all kinds of different situations say nobody else is going to understand if they haven't been there. So it's difficult to then get out, and that brotherhood or that camaraderie is gone, and it's difficult to find it. I was just talking to somebody today who's really in the artist community. Hello. Who was saying, hey, we came here, we've been here for a while, and we just don't know anybody. And so I'm really trying to find that kind of brotherhood out here, and whether it's jujitsu or it's motorcycles or it's some other kind of practice, some other kind of thing that I can be in with somebody else. I think those make the best friendships, or those make the best bonds, because it's hard to find that getting out. And it's, I even talked to some of my buddies I was locked up with, and it's just not the same. Once you're out of that situation, it's almost like it's different. I know a lot of people that do really well in prison that don't do well out, and I know a lot of people that do really well out that don't do well in, so. But yeah, hello everybody, and thank you. I'm just kind of reflecting on camaraderie and connection in this time that I'm adjusting in my life and figuring out what's important and how to build friendships and how to build relationships and how to make sure that I'm there for other people and that other people can be there for me. There's a meme that went around that was like Winnie the Pooh, and all it said was, we're all walking each other home. And that's really how I try to look at life, is remembering that the best thing that I can do is be there for myself and be there for other people. And the best thing I can ask anybody else to do is to be there for themselves and be there for me. And to develop that, where we can be independent people, but also be interdependent sometimes, support one another when we need to. That's been so important to me because, I've tried to do it all by myself, and that doesn't work. I've tried to only take care of other people's needs or only take care of other things, and then I get burnt out and exhausted and miserable, and that doesn't work. So it's finding a way to strike that balance where I'm responsible for my emotions, I'm responsible for my needs, I'm responsible for my experiences, but then I find other people with whom I can share experiences, and I can kind of try to lift them up, and they can lift me up, and we can, come to a good relationship. But so I get on here. I don't know if you guys have any questions. I know on a couple other social media platforms, I get a lot of questions. Some are really inappropriate, some are really good. But I know people have different motives in being here. Some people follow prison content because they're interested in, the experience of prison. They want to hear the crazy stories about the stabbings and whatever. But I think some people, have a deeper kind of desire for understanding. Like you said, the world is different than in prison or than in the military. The world is so fast-paced, and even the way that I live. So when I was inside, reading 2 to 3 books a week, meditating multiple times a day, working out every day, I had this routine. I used to write. I used to write so many letters. I had pen pals all over the world. I would write diaries or journals. I would write everything you could possibly think of. I got a couple articles published, and it was just constantly filling up my time. And part of that was I got tired of watching TV. The first couple of years, all I did was watch TV. And eventually I was like, man, I don't want to watch TV anymore. I'm done with this. So I had all this time, and out here in the world, I've got a phone I can get on and I can scroll through. I can turn on a TV. I can go walk out into the woods. I can do so many different things. I can call up my buddies whenever I want. And I think that's distracting because the kind of friendships that I found out here have not been nearly as kind of productive or meaningful as I would like, or in some ways is what I found in there. Because I call up my buddies out here, we tend to just talk about BS, or we just tend to talk about motorcycles or whatever, which is fine, but I want to engage with the world, and I would rather be riding motorcycles than talking about them, or rather be working on cars than just looking at them online, And we have this kind of spectator role in our society where we watch sports on TV, we consume content, we consume TV, we consume these things, but we don't get ourselves into them. That was why I got up this morning and I was like, I'm going for a walk. I live in a place where there's no easy place to walk, so I drove to a park, I went for a walk, did a couple miles, came back, I was like, I feel better. I feel like that's what I needed. I've engaged with the world, I've walked through the woods, I said hi to a guy who was running by. It just means a lot. Hello from Maine. I've never been up there, but my mom and my stepdad went on a trip when I was maybe 11 or 12 years old, and they absolutely loved it. They said it was one of the most beautiful places they've ever been, and they brought pictures, and I would like to see that. I don't know what the PKA podcast is, but let me know. I'm open to it. I've done a lot of podcasts, so. Chris Hedges. No, I don't think I have. I'd be interested. So if he did a lot of work on American incarceration, I'll have to reach out more. I have not consumed even newspapers and the media nearly as much. I've kind of relied on different people to point me in that direction. Let me know what I need to read, what I need to hear about, what I need to do. Because I get so busy, and it's hard in a world with this scope because I could spend months just looking at motorcycle content if I wanted to learn about that. But again, I'd rather be out in the world doing something. I could spend months reading the news, and I think it's important. I think it's really vital to understand what's going on both locally and nationally and globally. But I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to work that balance in. I'm still trying to figure out how to work that balance in of taking care of my basic needs and, kind of the meeting the needs of the community around me. How did I keep my mental health in good condition when I was in prison? It was a challenge. It was definitely not easy. The two main things were support and connection. I'm saying that as one of the two main things. In other words, finding other people that I could rely on, that I could connect with, that I could dump on, that would lift me up, that would hold me accountable, like finding that, and I was really lucky that I had support from the outside. I had people that would encourage me and basically allow me to be the person I am, but also hold me accountable. So if I did something shady, or if I said something shady, or if I remember I was in this like terrible, really unhealthy, abusive relationship with this woman. And she'd been gaslighting me and going back and forth, and this whole day of like horrible stuff. And I said something. I think I just snapped and said something nasty. And I called my friend and I told her the whole thing that happened. And her only response was like, "You need to apologize." I was like, "Did I not just get over telling you the 10 hours that she did this to me?" She was like, "I don't care. Like, I don't care what she does. I'm holding you accountable. Like, you need to own up to what you did." And that's what I want in a friend. I want somebody who's absolutely going to call me on my stuff and say, "You know what? You're right. Like, I'm responsible for my stuff regardless of what anybody else does." And that made a big difference. And then the second thing is structure, like meaningful engagement and structure in the world. So having time every morning where I meditate, where I read, where I drink coffee, where I do whatever, having that time, knowing that when I get up, I'm gonna meditate, or I'm gonna exercise, or I'm gonna go for a walk in the woods, or I'm gonna do all of them, like that gives my day meaning. That gives me like connection. And then getting out there with people, like being able to go into the juvenile facility. I'm kind of heartbroken about everything. And I'm thinking about Christmas and I'm like, man, I don't want to be alone. Like, I don't know what to do. I kind of want to fly out and see my friend. She invited me out there, but I just don't have the money. So I was like, well, I wonder if I could go like bring food to the kids at the juvenile detention center. Like I can either cook food, or if I can get the money, I can, maybe raise money to basically buy good food so these kids can know they're not forgotten at Christmas. Because I know I'm lonely at Christmas out here in the world. I was super lonely every year in prison. And so I know how that feels. If I can do one small thing to make their Christmas better, or make them know that they've been remembered, let them know that they're not lost or they're not irredeemable, I feel like that's gonna make me feel better than anything I could do, better than any trip I could take or anything I could do for myself. Because if I can share that kind of light with somebody else, I find it reflected back at least twice as strong. So those were the things that allowed me to keep my mental health strong. But yeah, I was also in therapy constantly. I meditated daily. I did a lot of work on myself. I tried to be really self-aware. I got a degree in psychology. I read a lot of self-help books. I really tried to work for those things. When did I handle all the violence in prison? I don't know if you mean how. Yeah, so violence in prison, at least where I was, the most nefarious part of it is that it isn't like constant and isn't predictable. Because if you know every Tuesday something's gonna happen, I remember this was the excuse they gave for children who were abused. If you know every Friday dad's gonna punch you in the face, like, well, you know just to not come home Friday, or you just know you're gonna get punched in the face. But when you don't know when it's gonna happen, or when it's gonna explode, or when something's gonna go on, that's really what's traumatic, because you're always waiting. Like, your body never gets out of that fight or flight mode. You never get to like regulate your nervous system. And that's what prison was. So it was incredibly boring and slow and nothing happening. And then all of a sudden you see 18 guys stomping on somebody's face. Like, and obviously 18 people can't do it. And actually, strangely, the more people that try to jump you at one time, often the less you get hurt, because they get in each other's way. But the point being that you basically don't. I mean, you don't deal with it. You avoid it as much as you can. If something happens, you try to handle it as quickly as possible. If you're getting jumped, you ball up. Like, there's no easy answer. There's no like, one and done. You can go the route that a lot of people do. They pick up a weapon and they end up getting a lot more time, and they end up taking somebody's life. That was not the route I took. Like, I made a commitment to myself early on that I would not have a weapon. I would not have a knife, for two reasons. One, because I ever got myself into a situation where I needed a knife, I had already really messed up, and I needed to be accountable and make sure I wasn't doing crazy things or saying crazy things or putting myself in that situation. And two, it was a calculated risk. I realized, okay, I can have this and know that if the worst case scenario, I can protect myself and save my life, but probably spend the rest of my life in prison. Or I can trust that I will be able to navigate. I can trust that I will figure out an alternative, or I'll trust that I'll wear an ass whooping, but I basically can wear that ass whooping. And it worked out. I had one situation where somebody had a knife and was in between me and the stairs, and that was a bad situation because I didn't have a weapon. I guess I could have jumped over the tier. I might have been able to land on the table and like get away had he charged me, but yeah, it's not a good situation. But again, that was one time out of 19 years. I had some fights, I had some issues, I had some conflict, but I was able to live in such a way that I didn't make enemies. I was true to my word. I was who I said I was. Like, I didn't have bad charges. So I was in a position where I had to create drama to end up with that level of drama. Like, there's a difference between getting in a fight with your cell partner because you're just irritated with each other, or the kind of small minor things and something that gets that serious. And so I basically just lived in such a way that I stayed away from anything that serious. And I'm really grateful for that, because I know some people that are in there that are never getting out, or probably never getting out. And I think that's such a shame, because they're not necessarily bad people. Some of them did really stupid things to go there, and some of them did things inside because that's what people told them they had to do. And I always go back to when I got to Nottoway, there was a guy who got there about the same time as me. I had a 32-year sentence, he had a 30-year sentence. And I had everybody in my life telling me, you need to do something positive, you need to go to college, you need to, like, cool. He had everybody telling him, look, dude, you got a 30-year sentence, you're young, like, you better make an example of somebody or else. And of course, about a year in, he found a situation, it wasn't even involving him, it was involving with his homeboys. He went and he stabbed the guy up. And he was sitting there with this like smile on his face in the hole, because you could walk by the jail cages or the hole cages where they were outside. And he was proud of himself. Like, he felt like that was what he was supposed to do. And I remember thinking that was such a shame, because he'd basically just thrown at least 5 years or 10 years of his life away on top of what he was already serving for some idea. But when it really comes back to his safety, like, he didn't feel safe. He didn't feel like he could be in a place without getting messed with, or he didn't feel like he could be in a place where like somebody wouldn't try him. So he did that to have safety, because we don't have a situation that's safe. We don't create a safe environment. And I just think that's such a shame, because I was willing to live with that threat of danger rather than creating that artificial safety. One, because I didn't want to hurt anybody else. I had caused enough harm, I had caused enough pain to other people. And two, I wanted to get out of prison. And I tried to have everything, looking towards getting out of prison. But yeah, some people are proud of dumb stuff. But again, I think it's, there's being proud of dumb stuff, and then there's being proud of stuff that you don't realize is dumb, if that makes any sense. Like, I genuinely believe he thought what he was doing was the best for him, or the best for his situation, or the best for his safety. And he didn't know any better. Somebody just asked me this earlier. I have thought of starting a podcast. Here's my issue. Podcasts require equipment, and they require money, and they require time, and I don't generally have that. Now, I guess theoretically I could just take this time that I'm going on live, and I could be recording it. I tend to go on other people's podcasts. The other thing I know is because like Courtney worked 3 years on one season of her podcast. I mean, they got DNA evidence tested. They spent hours and thousands, like an insane amount of time, and didn't make any money. And the problem is, if I'm going to spend that much time, if I'm going to spend 400 hours, I'm sorry, I got to find some way to recoup that. Like, that has to like come back in money. And I don't know how that works. I know if big production companies pick you up, I know if you go host a program, if you get sponsored, like that's one thing, but I just don't know how to do that. And I can't imagine sinking like every free moment, because I'm already busy with the nonprofit, with the other social media stuff I'm doing, with speaking. I can't imagine basically sinking the last of my time into that. Because at least if I sink it into actually finishing my book proposal and sending it off to agents, then I'll have something to show for it. Whether I get a book or not, whether I get a deal or not, I'll at least have done something and I have to show for it. Whereas if I spend all that time doing the podcast, I don't know. Maybe that's just selfish or short-sighted. It's kind of exhausting. But I would love to find somebody to sponsor me and encourage me to do a podcast. But yeah, so with the lives, that's what I do. I take the lives and I'll leave them live and available on the channel. But I've also done some video interviews. I've done Graham when I went to pick him up from prison, which I thought was absolutely amazing. I did one with Josh, my buddy who was a CEO, he was a global leader of something for a Fortune 50 company, and then worked for a nonprofit, now starting his own business. I've tried to interview people who've been previously incarcerated, kind of share their stories. I just haven't had the opportunity to really get it together. There's a guy named Ian Bick who I'm flying up to see him in Connecticut, and he's gonna record me on his thing, so yeah. And yeah, Your Hustle is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And it's because it's those genuine stories, and it's so well produced, and it's so well done, and yeah. All right, books. I read a lot of fiction. I read a lot of nonfiction. My goal was, if I could get 2 books from the library, I would get 1 fiction and 1 nonfiction, and I had to finish at least half of the nonfiction before I could read the fiction. Sometimes the whole one, but usually it was like half, because then I could go back and forth. So I read a lot of things, from cheap thrillers like Lee Child, like the Jack Reacher books, to literature, to pretty much anything you can think of. I just didn't like westerns or romance novels. I never get into those. But in prison, you're allowed to have 13 books. They used to be 12 and a Bible, then somebody sued and it became 12 and a religious text, and then somebody who wasn't religious sued and they said, okay, you just have 13 books. That's way easier. And then you could have 2 library books if you had them checked out from the library. But it was frustrating for me, like when I would take my college classes, I might have 7 books from there. That means I can only have 3 personal books. But at the same time, it was worth it to me, and I was always willing to get a charge for that. If I ever get a charge for having too many books, I was just down with it. So I would take other guys, they would get books donated, but they didn't really want them. I would buy their donated books, so that way I could turn books in every time more came. So I usually had 30 or 40 or 50 or just a bunch of books. And then when I got shipped from Buckingham to Coffeewood, I gave all my stuff away. I literally filled up 3 tables, like piled high full of books, full of just random stuff that I couldn't take with me, and still took 13 books and all my stuff with me. And that was a good feeling though, because I had given, probably thousands of books to the library over those years, and I still had this many things. And so I knew that was going to somebody else. Because everything I got, I don't want to say everything I got, but generally everything I got brought me some kind of joy or education or meaning. So I always tried to share that with somebody else. If this book had been meaningful to me, I wanted somebody else to read it. I wanted somebody else to have that experience. Share how to find me on other platforms. Thank you. So you know this stuff better than I do. Second_Chancer, so SECOND_Chancer. I'm on TikTok. That's probably where I have the like biggest audience. On Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube. Always happy to connect with people. And again, I've done things on different platforms, and I want a better understanding of like what people want to learn. Because what I found is I'll have a video that does like 1 million views on TikTok, and it'll get like 2,000 views on YouTube. And it's like, okay, so what's the difference? Like, what is it that people want to know or they want to hear? And where can I do the advocacy work that I want to do? As I kind of look at the videos, I'll do the entertaining stuff. I'll do the stuff that stories that people want to hear, but that's not really what I'm passionate about. Like, that's something to get people involved and interested. And then I want to talk about reform. I want to talk about what we can do better. I want to talk about trauma. I want to talk about things that are really important to me, because I think you need an education aspect on top of the entertainment. So like, entertainment draws us in, right? But if we leave learning a lesson, we leave learning something that's going well or going poorly, we leave with a different perspective, I feel like then you've had educational entertainment. I have, actually my backpack's in the room. I have an IFS self-therapy book is what I'm reading right now. So IFS is internal family systems. I tried all kinds of different therapy while I was in prison. I've done Gestalt therapy, I've done DBT, I've done CBT, I've done pretty much anything you can think of. And then I came across IFS, and it's been the most profound therapeutic experience of my life. And it's really expensive to see a therapist. I mean, even at like, what do you call it, cut rate or whatever, they like give you a discount depending on how much money you have. I mean, you're still talking about like $100 an hour. It's insane. And so I can't afford to go as much as I would like, so I'm trying to get this to work on myself. That makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. It's so funny. We were, the other night we were all together, and somebody was like asking me questions about social media, and I was like, dude, I don't know. Like, I can't give you good technical answers. I'm sure there's somebody on YouTube who's got a great answer, but yeah. Well, I'm glad you're here then. Sliding scale, thank you. Yeah, I think that, some of the social medias can be like a black hole. You get on them and you just don't get off. Like, they just kind of suck you in. I think everything's different, right? Like, TikTok is like quick and it's like just addictive, right? Whether it's something, and sometimes it's incredibly educational. Sometimes it's just entertaining. Sometimes it's dance videos. Sometimes it's inspirational as hell. Facebook for me is like connecting. Like today, I was like, hey, I want to get out of my own head. Is there a place I can go volunteer? And I know I can make a post and ask somebody, is there a place I can volunteer today? And I'm going to get 50 or 100 or 200, however many comments. And so I have ideas. And now I have people connected with. And like next time I need to go volunteer, I have a place to go. So that's really helpful for me, whereas I can't necessarily do that on YouTube. YouTube for me is like the place where you explore like the depth of content. Like I find these amazing stories and deep interviews and podcasts, and like it's just deeper. And I think that we're in a society that is like even moving away from that. I think people when YouTube started thought it was like the short form, or it wasn't like good enough. It wasn't as good as TV or movies. But now people are even moving away from YouTube because they don't want to like spend more than 30 seconds or more than 60 seconds. It's all about like a quick picture or a quick post. Hello from Vancouver. I would love to visit Canada. I was just talking to somebody about this. So I got invited to a speaking engagement in Canada, and I'm not allowed to leave the country based on my probation. And I went to my probation officer, was like, hey, could I get permission to go to Canada? Like, is there a way to do this? And what we found out is like Canada won't even let felons in. You have to get a certificate of rehabilitation. You have to go through all these things. But apparently, if you're going for a purpose other than vacation, for work or for, I guess, maybe a speaking engagement, something, they will give waivers. And I don't know exactly how that works, but yeah. So I'm trying to figure out if that's going to be a possibility. But yeah, and people don't want to focus for a long time. We are a kind of pinball society. Like we go from one thing to the other. We go for the next thing that's going to release a neurotransmitter and like release some dopamine in our brain. And it's like, it's good. We're probably productive and we're going around, but I don't think it lets us be happy. Because I know when I'm in that mode, when I'm not centered and I'm bouncing from one thing to the next, or I'm just scrolling through my phone, there's no sense of peace in me. Whereas this morning when I went for a walk and I wasn't on my phone, or when I did, that's where I get my sense of peace. When I go do a really killer workout, or I go get on the mat for an hour and that's where I feel like I leave feeling whole. And I think all those times where we're scrolling through things, we're just kind of divided. Nova Scotia too. I can visit for work. Okay, sweet. I just have to figure that out. Sure, I would definitely consider doing a book review on live. I wonder how I would do that because I don't have all the physical copies of the books. because I had like on my link tree is all the books that, not all the books, but some of the books that like really changed my life. I wanted to really highlight the ones that had such a huge impact. So they're up on the link tree, but I don't have physical copies because, like I said, when I got done, I either donated to the library or donated them to somebody else. But yeah, I kept up the news in prison so much better than I did out here. I used to get a magazine called The Week that had like a national, a topical, and then an international section. And it was a weekly review of all the major like newspapers around the world, basically, like all the articles that mattered. I used to watch the local news and the nightly news. It was just, yeah. At 9/11, prisoners didn't know for a few days. I'm taking Virginia, they knew right then because everybody has TVs in their cells. So just like everybody else in the world, they turned their TV on and somebody yelled out in the pod like, "Holy S, dude, like, can you believe, oh my God, turn your TV on." So everybody would have known. I didn't get locked up till 2002, so I was after, but that was how every major event happened. Somebody would be in the cell and would, yo, y'all turn the TV on, or they would go out in the pod and turn it on and everybody would get quiet. So I'm sure some places are different. Some places don't have TVs. They would have locked guys away to like not let them know. But I mean, I guess back then, yeah, it wasn't as prevalent. Like right now, everybody has cell phones. So like, even if you're in a place that has few, there's at least one guy in there with a cell phone, so he's gonna find out. But yeah, it's a different world. There's definitely, it's like a wall of information. But weirdly, like I said, I knew more about the news. I read more. I was more cultured and educated on a daily basis in there than I am out here. And I think actually that's a big part of the reason I am the person that I am, because I didn't have all those distractions. I wasn't constantly like skimming through something. I was actually diving into a book, or I was diving into a concept, or I was writing an essay. And yeah, I kind of miss that. Thank you so much. I'm glad that I'm a good storyteller. I'm sorry that some of my stories are kind of morbid, but we look forward to doing more. Oh yeah, I think John Green did one talking about the money on social media too and how the problem is. Because I know like I've done a lot of oh wow, they were rioting on 9/11. That's terrible. Yeah, I've done a lot of videos on YouTube and I have made like $30. Like that's not the place to do it. But then again, I know that some people get that engagement. Like I remember one person, I think they started out and like within a month they had like 3.5 million views on one video and a bunch of other stuff, and they made a fortune. So I don't know how that works, but again, the majority of the stuff I do on social media is to kind of highlight the things that we can do, like do advocacy work. Because we have the nonprofit and we have a little bit of funding, and we need to obviously get more funding, but that allows me to do the direct work that I want to do. We've got a guy in power to do reentry programming. I'm going to the juvenile facility. We've got a violence interruption unit going to the juvenile facility. So we have all kinds of things happening. The advocacy work is where I get out in the world and talk about things, because people either may not know or they may not care. And I hate to say this, but a lot of times there's a racist component to that. People say, oh, I don't care about prison, like it doesn't affect me. But all of a sudden they see a white guy who could be their son or their brother or their nephew or their somebody, and they go, wait, like that could have happened to me, like that could have happened to my son, that could have happened to my brother. And I think it gives a different perspective. Because I found that I'm received in places that other creators are not. So, but anyways, all right, y'all, have a wonderful night. Thank you for letting me ramble on and talk about everything. And